Ever think that maybe the key to aging better isn't some, exotic pill, but something already inside us, like a guard standing watch in our cells?
It's a fascinating idea, isn't it? And that's pretty much what we're diving into today. We're looking at a protein called p53. It's a real workhorse.
Exactly. And not just for its famous job, fighting cancer. We're going deeper, exploring its surprising connection to inflammaging.
Ah, yes, inflammaging. It's really central to understanding aging. It's this kind of chronic, simmering, low-level inflammation that builds up over time.
Not like a full-blown infection, but more like a constant background hum of inflammation.
That's a good way to put it. And a big driver of this seems to be these things called senescent cells.
Okay, senescent cells, the ones that stop dividing, they just kind of retire.
Well, they stop dividing, yes, but they don't exactly go quietly. They often develop what's called the SASP, the senescence-associated secretory phenotype.
SASP. Sounds complicated.
It is a bit. Think of it as the cell broadcasting inflammatory messages. It pumps out cytokines, enzymes, stuff that can irritate and damage the surrounding tissue, creates that inflammatory hum you mentioned.
Gotcha. So, older cells shouting inflammatory stuff, contributing to aging. Now, bring in p53. Where does our guardian fit into this picture? Our sources suggest it wears two hats.
Right. For decades, p53 was primarily famous as the guardian of the genome. Its main gig was preventing cancer.
How did it do that?
If a cell gets DNA damage or stress that might lead to cancer, p53 steps in. It can pause the cell cycle for repairs, push the cell into that senescent state we just talked about, or even trigger apoptosis-programmed cell death, basically eliminating the danger.
A cellular firefighter, then. But there's this other side, right? The newer story about inflammation.
Exactly. The really interesting part emerging now is that p53 might also act more like a peacekeeper. It seems to help quiet down those noisy senescent cells.
How so? By telling them to tone down the SASP.
That seems to be a key part of it. It looks like p53 can help temper that inflammatory output, reducing the harmful signals those cells are sending out.
So it's not just stopping cells becoming cancerous, but also managing the troublemakers that are already senescent,
Yeah.
making them less disruptive. Okay, how? What's the mechanism?
Well, our sources point to a couple of important things. One key mechanism involves p53 working with a partner protein, 53BP1.
Okay.
Together, they seem to help prevent bits of DNA, these cytoplasmic chromatin fragments, from leaking out of the nucleus of senescent cells.
Chromatin fragments floating around. Why is that bad?
Because those fragments act like danger signals inside the cell but outside the nucleus. They can trigger an immune alarm system called the CJ-isting pathway.
CGS.
And that pathway activates a major inflammation controller called NF-kappa B, which then ramps up the production of those SASP components. So by keeping the chromatin fragments contained, p53 helps prevent that whole cascade from starting.
Ah, I see. So it nips the problem in the bud, in a way, prevents the alarm from sounding. Are there other ways it helps?
Yes, it seems p53 might also have a more direct role. It appears capable of influencing the actual transcription, the reading of the DNA blueprint for some of the SSP genes themselves.
Like turning down the volume knob on producing things like interleukins or those matrix metalloproteinases.
Pretty much. It can directly regulate the production line for some of those inflammatory molecules. And, research suggests its influence isn't just limited to 2-gulisting. It likely impacts other inflammatory routes, too.
Wow. Okay, so p53 is juggling quite a bit. Cancer prevention, keeping senescent cells in check, dampening inflammation, which naturally leads to the big question, can we actually use this therapeutically?
That's the exciting frontier. And yes, researchers are definitely exploring ways. Our sources mention several avenues, though many are still quite experimental. One idea is xenomorphics.
Xenomorphics, what's that?
It's about finding drugs that can mimic or boost p53's ability to suppress the SASP. So not necessarily killing the senescent cells, but making them behave better, making them less inflammatory, kind of like cell therapy, to improve their attitude.
Okay, reforming the troublesome cells. Interesting. What else?
Another approach targets a protein called MDM2. MDM2 normally acts as a brake on T53.
So, inhibit the brake.
Exactly. MDM2 inhibition could boost p53 levels and activity. This is actually being tested in some cancer treatments already.
But for aging, it's probably trickier, right? You wouldn't want to just globally boost p53 everywhere.
Absolutely. Critical point. The dosage would need to be incredibly precise for aging applications. Too much p53 activity could cause problems in healthy cells, like issues with blood cell production cytopenias. It's a fine line.
Makes sense. Okay, what about going after those downstream pathways, like the C-gasting thing you mentioned?
Yep, that's another angle. Developing CB pathway modulators, drugs that directly block that C-gasting alarm system.
So even if the chromatin fragments leak, the alarm doesn't go off as loudly.
Sort of, yeah. These are being looked at for autoimmune diseases where inflammation is also a problem, and now researchers are seeing if they could work for senescence-driven inflammation too.
And what about supporting p53's original job, protecting the genome?
That's another thought, DNA damage response support. The idea is if we can bolster the cell's ability to repair DNA damage, maybe fewer cells become senescent and start producing SASP in the first place?
Seems logical, but I imagine messing with DNA repair is complex.
Very complex. You risk upsetting the balance of cell survival and potentially causing other problems if you're not careful. It's definitely not straightforward.
It really sounds like a balancing act with all these options. Are people thinking about mixing and matching?
Definitely. Combination approaches are getting a lot of attention. For instance, maybe pairing a senomorphic to quiet down the SASP with a senolytic.
Senolytics.
Yeah,
Those are the drugs designed to actually kill senescent cells, right?
correct. So the combo idea is clear out some of the worst offenders with a senolytic and then use a senomorphic to manage the inflammatory output of any that remain.
A kind of 1-2 punch.
Potentially. But again, figuring out the right drugs, the right doses, the right timing, and proving long-term safety. That's all still very much work in progress.
So the potential is definitely there. Harnessing p53 seems really promising. But translating this into actual therapies for aging sounds like there are still major hurdles.
Oh, absolutely. The biggest one really is adapting strategies from cancer, where you might tolerate more side effects, to aging, where you need something much safer and more subtle.
That dosage issue again, finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. You need enough effect to suppress the SASP meaningfully, but not so much that you cause widespread cell death or stop healthy tissues from repairing and regenerating. Too much p53 activity could lead to tissue atrophy, for instance.
It's like trying to turn down the thermostat without accidentally switching on the air conditioning full blast in winter.
That's a great analogy. Finding that precise modulation, that therapeutic window, is the key challenge. It's a very delicate balancing act.
And beyond the science itself, what about getting these things approved? The regulatory side must be pretty daunting for anti-aging therapies.
It is. Regulators, quite rightly, will demand very strong long-term safety data.
You need to show it doesn't, increase cancer risk down the line or mess with organ function.
Precisely. Robust evidence showing long-term safety and efficacy specifically for age-related conditions will be absolutely essential. It's a high bar.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. What have we learned in this deep dive? p53 is clearly more than just a cancer fighter.
Definitely. It's this crucial player with this established guardian role, but also this really fascinating emerging role in controlling age-related inflammation, the SASP, a genuine dual function.
And it does this through multiple routes, stopping those chromatin fragments from triggering alarms, directly regulating inflammatory gene expression. It's complicated.
It is. And that complexity offers potential therapeutic targets, xenomorphics, MDM2 inhibitors, ST modulators, maybe even combinations.
But, and it's big but, the challenge is immense. Fine-tuning any intervention to hit that sweet spot, suppressing inflammation without causing harm elsewhere, is paramount.
That's the crux of it, the balancing act. But the research is moving forward, and understanding these p53 mechanisms is crucial.
It really opens up the possibility down the road of harnessing our own internal guardian, not just to prevent cancer, but potentially to promote healthier aging through really carefully designed treatments.
The future potential is significant, yes. With continued research, careful development, and rigorous testing, we might get there.
It's been fascinating.
Yeah.
Really highlights the intricate biology at play, and leaves me thinking, given how fundamental p53 is involved in life, death, repair, inflammation, what are the deeper implications, maybe even ethical points, we need to consider when we start talking about tweaking its activities specifically for aging? Where's that line between beneficial intervention and potentially risky manipulation? Something to keep thinking about.